So, hello and welcome back to the Potted RV. My name is Constance. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, I always get this particular intro backwards. Welcome back. So, I apologize. I hope that the mic doesn't pick that up. There's a semi coming right down the road. Today, I'm going to go over the way I compost for my small space. I am quite limited on space, for obvious reasons. We rent a spot in an RV park, so I'm limited in what space that is there for my campsite. So one of the main ways I do is with a compost barrel. In all honesty, compost barrels, in my view, for most your average size gardens, they just don't produce enough. However, I use a compost barrel, and I'm going to bring you around and I'm going to show you the barrel. And some of my older videos, you can see it. It's just a standard compost barrel, and I will link it in the description. It is one of them that I do recommend on Amazon. Be careful if you're going to order these barrels on Amazon, because if it's not Amazon Prime, you're going to have problems with it getting it shipped correctly. So you're definitely going to want to watch where it says Amazon Prime, and I'll show you how the barrel works. They're very simple to put together. They're easy to move around, which makes them useful. But the one problem is they don't produce a whole lot of compost, but they do produce it quickly. So if you're older and can't really turn a traditional compost system like you would traditionally use, or you're in a smaller space where you, one, don't need huge massive amounts of compost, but you do still want to compost and just be able to compost the clippings and whatnot. To be honest, with clippings, because of the amount of pest pressure I've got, I'm going to show you something else to do with clippings, and that'll be Friday's video. We're going to do making your own high nitrogen fertilizers. You can do that. It takes nothing more than a 5-gallon bucket and a rock, a decent sized rock, and you can. And I'll go over how to do that. So right now, let's go ahead and go over and look at the compost, and let me explain how you work this particular compost. So this is my compost barrel. It is I want to say it's an 84-gallon compost barrel. It is a dual chambered compost barrel, and this one, if you can see in it, which is probably not the easiest thing. Let me see if I can. Yeah. So it is not ready yet because my husband put way too many eggshells in there, because that's what that is a massive amount of eggshells. I'm not sure why he did that. He should know better. This one is the one we are putting in now, and basically they're pretty simple. You'll use one side until it's pretty much full, which this side that is already nearly done, but my husband put too many eggshells in, is and that's okay. They just take longer to break down. Is the one we have finished, and it's just once a week turning. And a lot of times you have to rock it, and then once in a while, depending on how dry it's looking, I go through and I water it. You are going to have water coming out the bottom. That is normal. It does have breathers. It needs it because composts via bacteria and living creatures. They do have to breathe. So this is my recommended method of composting in a small area. However, there are other ways you can do it. And I don't have examples of them, but I can at least explain them. Okay, my camera decided to go a little wonky on me, and it does that on occasion. So another thing that you can do when you're dealing with small space gardening, it's one of the cheapest ways to go about it, is those really big storage containers that you can get in Walmart that have the lid. You can drill holes in the bottom and the top. And once you have filled it with your green and your brown materials, you water it once a week and flip it. Just pick the whole thing up, turn it over. And you keep rotating and doing that. I did that at one point in time, and that works perfectly fine. It will compost down, and it does work fairly quickly by comparison to just letting this big compost mound and letting it just build up on its own. I've done that method too. In Arizona, we had an old washing machine that had basically taken a quit. So my husband had taken it apart, and it was a washing machine. The barrel part of it, because it has those drainage holes for draining out the water at the end of the cycle, I just used the barrel. I put all of our compost into that, and then when I got around to it, if I could, I'd pick it up and flipped it. Most of the time I didn't. I just let it until it got to the point where I was ready to hand it over to the chickens and let the chickens go through and gather all the grub worms and icky stuff I didn't want to put in my garden. Once they were done with it, I just put it over into my garden. Composting is a fairly simple thing to do. When you do your barrel compost, this takes a couple of months before it's really technically ready. It's still not completely broken down. Even at that point, it is a hot composting method, but it's still not completely broken down. So when you do the bins at Walmart and just drill holes in them and flip them back and forth, now keep in mind you will want to keep those out of the sun. I would tuck them up underneath, either put them in a shed or put them underneath your house in some way, form, or fashion. You don't want to leave them out in the sun because that type of plastic is not a resin plastic. It's not designed to handle a lot of sun pressure, so it will start breaking and cracking. So keeping those out of the sun is a good thing to do. Another one that also uses those is by buying multiple levels of them and buying, in all honesty, a lot of times, especially during the spring and fall seasons when you have a lot of fishing, you can get the night crawlers and red wigglers at Walmart alive and literally just make a worm composting system that way and use them for your composting. That is a great way to do it. I would love to be able to do that, and I had wanted to do that here, but I would need somewhere that stays completely out of the shade, out of the sun, because worms do not like heat. But I have a 2-year-old. He's almost 2.5. Well, he's over 2.5 now. He's very interested in anything to do with my garden. And like his mama before him, he's not afraid of bugs. That presents a bit of a problem. So I haven't done that. When we finally purchase a place and move on to that place, and I've already discussed it with my husband, we're still going to do a small space, even though we'll probably expand the YouTube channel into covering the building process of starting off. I grew up in an agricultural situation, so I have a different background than a lot of people do. So it's not going to be a rushed thing. But this small space gardening, in all honesty, being a devoted small space garden, even though I'm a very, very, very tiny channel, technically considered a micro channel, I don't care. I love my audience. I do, but I do YouTube for me. I do it because I'm wanting to document this process, and I want to show that it can be done. You don't need a lot of space. You don't. You can do this, and you can find enjoyment and fulfillment in it, even if you're not doing it. Even if you're hoping. Here's the thing. It is a bad misconception to think, and I've noticed that a lot of homesteading channels, they really go into this self-sufficiency. When it comes to them, they have something to bring to the table. And this is important to me. So you might not necessarily agree with their politics, their reasoning why. Don't shoot them out. A good example is with my small space gardening. One very quick thing I learned is you cannot garden the way you do with a large garden in a truly 100% small space. You can't do it. I was so certain that a lot of it would just transfer over. It doesn't. You have a large mix of varieties. You can't compost the same way because I can't fit a 3 foot by 3 foot section and not have my camping neighbors complain. There's no way. I don't have the ability to do that, so I had to rethink it. I've had some people bring up Bukashi composting. Bukashi is not actually composting. It is breaking it down through bacteria, but it's anaerobic. And it's still a very good way to recycle. So it is perfectly viable, but it is not actually technically composting. I don't personally use it, mostly because it can be really messy. If you don't get the right containers for that, and they do tend to be very expensive. The spawn for Bukashi is not, but the containers are. They're very expensive. And because they're very expensive, when they start to leak, I have a problem. And that was my issue with them, is they did start leaking on me. I don't like dealing with the mess of it. It's just not something I want to do. So the least expensive way to go about it for a small space and still keeping it contained, I would say, would be the Walmart containers, and probably if you have the ability to do it via worm composting. Single strand of hair, but it's driving me crazy. Doing it that way is going to be your best bet, at least expense-wise. Doing it with the barrel that I do, those aren't all that expensive, but they tend to be a little easier to move around. I don't have to keep it out of the sun because that's the whole point of it. It's why it's black, is so that it heats up faster and it stays at a more hot temperature, is the reason why it is that way. My recommendation, in all honesty, is that barrel. It is a pain in the butt to get the compost out of. I will admit that. It's a pain. But it is more functional. It's easier and more user-friendly than picking something up and turning it. But that is my opinion. And like I said, I will link the barrel. I'll link the one that I know for a fact is definitely an easily put together, easily used. It's the one I'm using. Anyway, I do need to close this video out. It's starting to get long. I started to go into my little tangent about the small space gardening. And I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.